Everyone ready?
This is the SEC Insider Hit. Presented by your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent. Go local. Go with a home team.
Oh, good morning. The Out of Bounds Show. We're always talking about recruiting, adding talent to your roster. That's brought to you by Kinetic Staffing. Also, the NFL draft this week with Emmanuel Forbes out of Mississippi State. Had an insane career for the Dogs as a really top 1% playmaker out of Grenada and just made play after play for Mike Leach and Zach Arnett time and time again in big moments, big games. He's underrated because of the position he plays, for sure. But Forbes' name will be called early. And then Jonathan Mingo is flying up the board because there's a bunch of small receivers in this draft. And he's a big dude, and it's become a premium position now that they throw the ball around like they do in the NFL. Your SEC Insider Hit this morning, brought to you by Kinetic Staffing, executive search and long-term staffing leader. KineticStaffing.com. We welcome in Steve Robertson on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. This is ESPN 105.9 The Zone. And Steve, good morning. It's National Bucket List Day. What is something that you haven't done in sport, a sporting event that you haven't attended that Steve Robertson would like to attend that would be on your bucket list?
Well, the first thing that I'll say is you're lucky I'm here this morning. I started to text Blake and tell him that I had lost my voice from being able to perform this morning.
That is phenomenal.
But I'm here. And, I'd love to be able to go to, like, the World Cup. I think that'd be phenomenal. To be a part of those crowds and that atmosphere and that environment, I think that would be phenomenal. Matter of fact, when we have the World Cup here in the U.S., I'm going to work that out and take a couple of my sons to go see a game. I think they're in Atlanta, maybe. But,
yeah.
I'm going to go do that. That's one of those things I've always wanted to do. I'm a U.S. men's national team fan and never had a chance to see him play in person, so that'd be really cool.
Yeah, that would be a great event for sure. Steve Robertson, genespage.com, 247 Sports, and the Boneyard Podcast. Joining us on 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. Steve, we've been through this on a weekly basis, but the Mississippi State baseball team was close to taking their third series in a row and just let it get away from them yesterday. Now the schedule flips, and do they have enough in Dome? That didn't look good, and you hate it for that young man. But now with what they have ahead of them and missing out on some of the games that they've missed out on behind them, what is realistic for them over the next month?
I think maybe what's realistic is not getting swept. It's like the thing with especially losing Nate. It's like you finally get Cade Smith back and you get Aaron Nixon back and you're beginning to kind of see some things fall into place. And you're right, things with Nate did not look good yesterday at all. And, you hope for the best. I've had some situations in the past where it looks like, a doomsday scenario, and then you find out an MRI comes back and things are negative, and, they're able to make some sense of a comeback. And I've had some other guys walk off the mound and seem like everything is just okay, and then they have Tommy John, But we don't want to speculate about that. But, yeah, it doesn't look good. But the State went into Auburn basically with no margin for error. And then you had error. It's 3-1 run ball games, and both of those teams are very similarly situated. I'm not surprised in the least that those games were as competitive, but the one yesterday should not have been. It should not have been competitive. State gets a 7-0 lead in that ball game. My friends in the Auburn media are like, "Well, I told you it's going to be like this." I'm like, "Just be patient. Just wait. Just wait." I said, "Well, this bullpen that State has, no lead is ever safe," and that's kind of what happened with Auburn. But you had a couple of very mediocre teams that played a pretty good series, and both teams tried to give it away yesterday, and Mississippi State was successful in doing so.
Do you think Chris Lemonis' job is safe regardless of what plays out the next month?
I think so. I think so. Does that mean that there's not going to be changes? There's no way this staff returns intact. I just can't see it. And, yeah, like all those guys. But at the end of the day, here's the deal. I mean, this is not an employment agency. This is Mississippi State baseball, and fans expect more here. Even more than most of the SEC programs expect. And the price for winning is high, but the demand for winning is even greater. And I think that's the thing. I think Lemonis is probably safe, probably for another year. See how things go, but yeah, there's no way you can return kind of intact after back-to-back years of this. And I understand injuries are part of the deal, but at Mississippi State, you should always have enough depth to overcome most of that. Because what's happening is when you lose your frontline guys, I mean, you might as well just pull somebody out of the stands at times. I mean, it's like, and I'm not going to go target a kid or anything, but let me tell you this: I have not thrown a baseball in a competitive baseball game in 30 years or longer. I can go out there and not walk a guy and then hit back-to-back hitters. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. But that's a mental focus issue. I can't believe it's a talent issue. But the reality of it is it's a non-competitive issue, and that's just not acceptable at Mississippi State.
All right, Foxhall's going to be replaced. Could you see a scenario where Lemonis goes out, he gets a new pitching coach, and Gautreaux actually stays, Steve?
Yeah, I could see that scenario unfolding, but, Jake's the guy, too, that had opportunities in each of the last, 3 years to leave, and most of them had coaching opportunities. He didn't take them, so this may be the year. Maybe it's maybe the opportunity for Jake, but, I think Jake would obviously have an opportunity to come back. I mean, he's a phenomenal coach, and the offense does disappear sometimes, but that's the game of baseball. But I do think you look how offensive this team is and how much they're willing to fight. I mean, just yesterday, Kellum Clark coming through with that big 2-out hit to get Colton Ledbetter in for an insurance run, and then the game is basically over, and Amani Larry doubles off the wall down there to give State a chance. I mean, that's coaching, that's competitiveness. I could see a scenario where Jake is back if he doesn't get the opportunity that he's looking for.
So you'd be okay with that, or would you like to see Lemonis with all new assistants?
Well, I think when you look at what Cheeseborough's done just look at what he's done with Ross this year. I think he's proven his value. I think early in the year, he was kind of unfairly maligned because we've gotten spoiled. We've had Logan Tanner for 3 years, and you look at the advancements that Ross Highfield has made in his game over the course of the last month.
Incredible.
It is, and that's Cheese, right? And so, I would certainly be in favor of Cheese coming back, and then we'll see. I think the reality of it is I get asked this all the time, and like when you're the head man, the buck stops with you. Period. Right? Anything that's wrong in your program is your responsibility. There is no passing the buck when you're the head man. But the reality of it is I think, Chris Lemonis is the guy that has earned the right to right the ship. And I think maybe you give him another year and then we see how things go from there. If this thing continues, it's like we're all doom and gloom this morning, and that's kind of how it feels after yesterday. Like when I texted some friends last night and I said, as soon as that game went final, I said, that's the game, the series, and likely the season. And that's how it felt, and still feels that way this morning. Now, can they go to Tennessee and win a series? Maybe. Man, Tennessee is red hot. They were absolutely listless. And they go and take care of Vanderbilt, so you're kind of catching them at the wrong time.
Yeah, you are.
You can go up there and get embarrassed, and then does it begin to cascade? Arkansas comes in. Arkansas has a terrible weekend this past weekend. It looks like that could be had, but listen, if, at this point, I don't think you could pick Mississippi State to win a series the rest of the year. A&M takes the series from Kentucky. And A&M's not great. And Arkansas, is ranked really high, but they're just kind of an average team too. And so, those games out there State might be able to pull, but, losing Nate and having the ineffectiveness of the bullpen that you've had here as of late, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. You got to get to 13, and you knew as well as I do, you had to win the games you're expected to win. That included yesterday. You didn't win that one, so now all of a sudden you got to make up some ground somewhere. I just don't see a lot of mercy in the schedule.
Steve Robertson, 247 Sports, the Boneyard Podcast. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Another disappointing year for Mississippi State baseball. So if you had to put a percentage on it, it sounds to me like you feel like Lemonis will be back. To me, it kind of sounds like 90%. And if Gotro wants to come back, he'll be back, and then they'll make a change at the with the pitching coach. You would think Zach Selman would allocate the resources to Lemonis to pay $400 to $600K at least. Actually, with what Jay Johnson did with Wes Johnson last year, maybe the price of poker is another couple $100,000 over that. How do you see that, Steve? This is an athletic department that can't skimp on offering. If they're going to bring back Lemonis, they can't really half-ass it, right? I mean, they need to give him a salary pool that is big enough to go compete and bring in a pitching coach with some dollars. How do you see it?
No, I agree with you 100%. And that's the thing, too. Zach Selman is from Oklahoma, obviously, and Oklahoma matters. Baseball matters at Oklahoma. It's not like it's just another sport there. I mean, they've won national championships there. And so he understands, maybe not to the extent of the passion that people have here at Mississippi State, but he understands how important baseball is. My question would be, when you look long-term in this is, who does Zach know? Who does Zach have a relationship with? That's the thing when, John being a baseball first guy, John was a guy that knew everybody and everybody knew John. And so it makes it a little bit easier, to go out there and staff these things. But, it's going to be at the limb, but, there's been so many people out there that think, oh, well, Zach, someone's going to come in and we're going to change the budgeting stuff and baseball is going to be de-emphasized. And I think anybody that truly believes that is delusional.
Right. I agree. Do you think that they are prolonging the inevitable by doing the scenario that we just said? Bring back Lemonis, bring back Gotro. Of course, there's a lot of bond relationship with that freshman group. So I do think that's a big piece of the puzzle that Lemonis, if it's absolute back against the wall in 4 weeks, he and Gotro have that in their back pocket and maybe the most important card to play. But if they do go this route, Lemonis back, Gotro back, who've had a lot of success, new pitching coach, but are they prolonging the inevitable? What would you say to a fan that you run into at Bulldog Burger that presents that to you at lunch today?
I hope not. And that's probably as far as I'm willing to go with it. I mean, at the end of the day, this is Lemonis' program, and he's shown a lot of loyalty to his assistants. This group has remained intact, and so this is a real challenge, not just for Zach Selman, but for Chris Lemonis. And last year it's like, hey, we need to go out and hit the portal hard, and they did. And on the portal side of things, you've had some success with Ledbetter and Larry, but on the pitching side, I mean, Dome has been your best reliever. Now he's on the shelf. Nixon's been on the shelf much of the year. I don't know that they allocated enough attention to pitchers in the portal.
Yeah.
And I'm not being negative about any one individual, but I tell you this: if you are coming from the junior college ranks to Mississippi State as a pitcher, you have got to be special. And you and I both know, I mean, listen, the transfer portal is changing the way junior college recruiting works. But if your ERA, 6.78 in junior college, you have absolutely no chance to compete at this level. I mean, and that's not a personal issue. It's not magic, it's math. You can't get junior college hitters out. You think you're going to be able to get out the best hitters in the country? Give me a break. That's the thing State's got to do is you got to make better decisions on the recruiting trail. And you got to get the developmental piece, and I think right now that's the thing that you're lacking. And I asked Lemonis earlier this year, how do you go from being an NCAA record-building staff, most strikeouts in the history of college baseball in 2021, to a point now where your best players are your freshmen? I mean, that's recruiting misses, it's developmental misses, and at Mississippi State, that's the one thing to me that's absolutely unacceptable. State has 0 shutdown weekend starters. And Cade Smith obviously gives you a great effort. He really does.
Sure.
But the fact that you have to go into this season and depend on freshmen to kind of piece this thing together, that's a major indictment.
What a talent it is. What a talented freshman class. Steve Robertson on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. That may be the card for Lemonis. And if Gotro wants to stay. Okay. What about Bradley Lofton? Do you expect him to pitch again? Do you expect him to pitch tomorrow night in the Governor's Cup against Ole Miss? Do you expect him to pitch against Tennessee? If and when, Bradley Lofton, Steve?
I don't know what to expect. And I admit I'm very perplexed by this because that was the big discussion. You move him off the week. He's going to go to the weekend. And Yeah, he's appeared one game, and he was in Auburn. He was in uniform. Didn't see him out there, with his arm dragging or anything like that, but nobody's talking about injuries this days. I would say this year it's probably more closed mouth than it ever has been. It's like last year. I mean, I'm down at Tulane and I see what happens with Stone Simmons, and then I ask him, hey, why didn't we bring him out for the ninth? Kind of give him a chance to talk about it. It's like, well, he just didn't feel right. Yeah, nobody's even having those discussions this year. People have gotten kind of hyper vigilant about protecting this talk about injuries. I mean, it's just like even the Cade Smith stuff that went on for weeks and weeks and weeks, and they're just not talking about it. And maybe that's their good thing, but the reality of it is that in years past, stuff would kind of leak out a little more regularly. And for some reason this year it's just not. Nobody's talking about it. And I don't just mean the staff. There's just a lot of people connected to Mississippi State baseball being very careful about this sort of thing.
They're going to need several hundred thousand dollars just for baseball NIL by July 1. If they're going to get some of the pitching that you just referenced, Steve. And I don't mean guys, that can't really get it done. So this is what everybody's asking. With the freshman class and the class they just signed, and we'll see who they net out in August, and then the portal in July, a little bit of August, they're going to need several $100,000, probably over $500,000, to compete pitching-wise. Do you think Mississippi State people are willing to commit to that between now and July 1 for Lamonis and whoever else is on the staff?
I don't really know, to be honest with you. I've had some dealings with NIL and that sort of stuff. We put on a rock show up here and raised $27,000, but that's a drop in the bucket of what you need. Let's just be honest about that. And it's like every little bit helps. It absolutely does. But it's a shame that we're in a situation where that's the conversation that I have most regularly with people. And like, well, I can't believe we're having to do this. And I said, well, I tell you what, this is the world in which we live, and until they put some guardrails around this thing and maybe figure out a way that NIL can be a level playing field, this is what we've got to do to compete. I don't like it either. Do you think anybody woke up a year ago and said, hey, I want to give more money to watch and enjoy the sports that I've always done? It just doesn't happen that way. But the landscape in college athletics has changed. And so, yeah, we're going to have to do it, whether it be utilizing your business to use a young student athlete to promote your business as part of a marketing campaign, then that's what we got to do. That's the reality in which we live. And there are a lot of other programs out there. Like LSU, I'd even give Ole Miss part of this too. There are a lot of people take a lot of pride in that, of how much money they give to the university. And I don't know that there's enough of those people at Mississippi State, to be honest with you.
It'll be interesting if they get their clock cleaned again in baseball NIL, and then they realize it in February or March, maybe by next year, and how much longer they're willing to sit on their hands. Real quick, I'm not asking you to do a deep dive, just 30,000 feet. The recruiting class is coming in, and it's unfair to say Highfield, Dakota Jordan, Gerangelo, Mershon, that type deal, among others. How would you rate it, and what's realistic for them to get out of that in 2024? If Lamonis, well, he will be. If he's back, he'll be coaching for his job.
Well, Dylan Cupp is one of the best shortstops in the country, and there's a lot of discussion that he is going to come to school, and which is amazing. You got to wonder how much of that is pre-draft talk or how much of that's legitimate. But that's the thing you begin thinking about, for next year. Slade Alford obviously has played some good baseball here as of late, especially on the defensive side. He had a big swing. But you get Slade at third and maybe Cubs at short, and Mershon goes to second, and Hines back at first. You start thinking, hey, this is a nucleus I can work with. And I think you've got to get out there and probably get some guys in the outfield and the portal. But, I like the nucleus of this team. I do think that you have put together back-to-back classes that are really, really talented. I just hope the guy gets a chance to coach them. With the portal, the way the landscape changing in college baseball, it could be not only could you make a coaching change, you could lose, a good percentage of your roster and possibly your class. And so But at the end of the day, nobody's bigger than the program. Nobody's bigger than the M over S, right? You got to do what's best for Mississippi State baseball, not what's best for a player or a coach or an assistant or a staffer or an athletic director, or even a university president. Nobody is bigger than the Mississippi State baseball brand, and that's what people have to. We have to go out and protect that.
Ole Miss, Mississippi State tomorrow. What if Lofton can't go? What would be your best guess on the mound tomorrow night in the Governor's Cup?
Maybe Evan Sierra to start, and then you kind of piece it together from there. That was the thing yesterday. I just, people talk about, well, managing. I mean, listen, when you've got some expansion in the lead, it makes sense that you don't eat up a bunch of arms, but, State needs to win that game Tuesday. I mean, even for no other reason, just to make your fans feel good, right? I mean, not to mention you need the RPI hit and everything else, but you got to go win that game, and it's just Peyton Plumlee, you corrected me on Twitter here a week or so ago. He goes, hey, Steve, that game is a must-win for us. And, I think that's how you have to approach it. You can't sit around feeling sorry for yourself. And then Ole Miss is on the same side of the street right now with us. So it'll be interesting to see, how they attack that and, who has pitching and who doesn't and how much you commit to go winning the ball game. But, State's got to go play a very disappointing Ole Miss team, a team that has some talent. You got to go play them and then get on the road and go to Knoxville and play a red-hot Tennessee team. It's going to be an interesting week, to say the least.
How frustrated are you that JT Quinn's dad pitched at Mississippi State out of Tampa, and he could be Ole Miss's ace next February, and has pitched well as of late in the third spot?
That kind of stuff's frustrating. At the end of the day, too, I mean, we can't sign everybody, right? I mean, that's it's just like you go to Auburn and like, oh my gosh, this kid from Germantown. It's like, yeah, well, he was a junior college kid in Mississippi. It's not like he signed direct, and he kind of made himself late. He was a really good player at Germantown and, had the big senior year. And I guess he was 5A player of the year. But by the time that kind of things happens, you've already kind of got your class in place. But, Mississippi State baseball recruits nationally. But, I mean, I've always been I'm a legacy guy. I think guys get looks because they're legacy. I don't think you sign a guy just because they're a legacy with the roster limitations you have these days. But it is very frustrating to see a kid that grew up in a Mississippi State family go out there as a freshman, be a weekend starter at Ole Miss when State desperately needs guys of that caliber.
All right, we'll leave it there. Emmanuel Forbes. I got 30 seconds. Forbes is going to be a rich man, maybe in the first, but it looks like definitely in the second round this week in Kansas City. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's so funny. It's way back in the fall. I had a scout from the Green Bay Packers tell me that if he's there when they pick late, they'd love to have him. But I think he could be a late first rounder, early second rounder. But either way, he deserves every bit of this.
Man, what a talent! Good grief! All right, thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Steve Robertson on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line, talking MSU baseball. Y'all feel any better after that? I'm not sure I meant to do that to y'all for 20 minutes, but we had to discuss. We're going to get back into bucket list and NFL draft. Forbes, Mingo, all the quarterback discussion around Bryce Young, baby. C.J. Stroud out of Ohio State. Hendon Hooker out of Tennessee. Anthony Richardson out of Florida. And Will Levis out of Kentucky. Our NFL draft discussion this week is presented by the #1 executive search firm in the Southeast, KineticStaffing.com.